How could God let this happen? How could this happen to us, God's people, on the holy day of rejoicing in God's Torah, on the holy day of the Sabbath, Shabbat? How could we get hit in such a way? And so we have to address that. We have to address that. And the further we are away from when it actually happened, the more appropriate it is to discuss that. We have to understand, nothing happens in this world without God. And so, as hard as it is to understand, we believe in God, and we've been hit before, and ultimately it doesn't affect our devotion and trust in Hashem, and we have to address it now. So what happened? How could such a thing happen? So it's no secret that we have enemies that want to kill us. So I want to come from a little bit of a reverse angle here and say like this. Instead of asking how could this have happened, ask how could it not have happened the day before, and the day before, the year before, years before. There are so many people that we see it now coming to the forefront that hate Jews, hate Israel, anti-Semitism, anti-God when it's all said and done. Because we're, after all, God's people. We're just pawns on the board here. It's God's board. If you hate us, you're hating God, the Creator. And so the miracle is, how come this didn't happen before? How come it hasn't happened 100 times with all of our enemies around the world? And so, discussing deep concepts from divine providence, bringing some mystical concepts in, I think the one way to start to understand, if we want to get textbook, which maybe even it's a bit premature, but if we want to get a bit textbook, I think we have to understand like this. When you look at the Bible, when you read the Bible and you see something interesting that you walk away with, whether there are happy stories or sad stories in the Bible, it's clear when reading the Bible, words of a prophet that spoke for God, the perspective we walk away with is that everything that happened was from God. Now, don't be naive to think that when these stories actually took place, that everybody walking around had this God consciousness, that it's all God, everything's for the good, Ein od milvado, the only thing that exists is God. That's not how the average person walks around today, and not how the average person walked around then either. And so what's the difference between reading the Bible and living through the history that the Bible tells us is the perspective. The Bible's perspective, it's impossible to get that wrong. From when you read the Bible, you understand God was not only watching, but God was manifest and doing. And therefore, when you read the Bible, it strengthens your faith in God. And of course, we're far away from the tragedies, so we say, why did the Jews suffer? Why did God let a nation come and kill the Jews throughout history when we were exiled, and even before that, even in Israel, when sometimes we lost in a battle? Even though the battle was a mitzvah, a commandment to go and take over that nation, we still lost sometimes and had casualties. Why? So when you read the Bible, you see that it's because God decided that He was not going to be with us that time. God withdrew His protection and His miraculous supervision and providence from us. And when He did, we were subject to the whims of nature. And when we were outnumbered or physically weaker, so then it was manifest. When we were successful, it was when God said, I'm with you. And if I'm with you, then everything's with you. And nothing could stop us. Very interesting beginning. The very first battles that Israel took place, that the Jews coming into Israel, that took place was the battle of Jericho. We see clearly, God said to Joshua, go into Jericho and wage war with Jericho. This was the first battle coming in for the conquest of Israel in the Torah. And at the end of the Torah, in the beginning of the Sefer of Joshua, Sefer Yoshua. And we see, God said, go into that city, go around, encircle the city one time a day, and on the seventh day, circle it 7 times, and the city is going to be placed into your hands. We did nothing. We circled, we blew the shofar and trumpets, and all of a sudden the walls collapsed, everybody was afraid, and we conquered that place, that city, without almost any real effort, and certainly no risk to even, not even Jewish life. No, there were no casualties on our side. This is when God is manifest with you, for you, helping you miraculously. So this was the first war experience. The very next experience of battle was to continue on our, at that point in time, mission, command to repossess the land that was promised to Avram, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we went to the next battle, and all of a sudden, this unstoppable army was stopped. We started a simple battle, and before you knew it, we were being killed, and we had to retreat, and we ran away, with, as the expression, with our tails between our legs. And the spirit of the entire people was downfall. How could that be? The people that are supposed to come in and repossess this land that's supposed to be our land, and we can't even win the second battle. We would have given up and run away. You know, what is this? So God makes it very clear. So, and when you read the Bible, you see it. God says, because I was not with you today in battle, because you turned against me, and I turned away from you. And in this particular context, it's insane what the reason why. When you read the reason why, it's all there in the Bible. It's because one person took from the consecrated objects, gold, whatever, he took that for himself. And the first battle of Jericho, everything was meant to be consecrated to God. And so one person was greedy for money, for gold, and took it. And because one person sinned, God removed his providence and protection from the entire nation. And people that were not even guilty of the theft, people that were not even guilty of betraying God, because we were part of one nation, were then subject to this attack and murdered in that battle, or killed in that battle. And when you look at the story, you're like, how could this be? The wicked man sins and the righteous man pays for the price, is killed? How is that fair? One person sinned and the other person is punished. That doesn't seem to make any sense. And so from here, it's explained that because the Jewish people are like one spiritual entity, and when we're connected, with the good we do, everyone benefits from, and unfortunately the bad we do, we're all subject to. So what happened is because one person failed, Hashem removed himself from protecting the entire people. Now, it's very important to get it clear. There are two ways to understand what happened. And with this, we're going to come to October 7th. The mistake would be to say that God, that is the judge of all the world and does justice, would actively punish person B for a sin that person A did. That's not impossible. That would never happen. It's just like the Torah says that a child doesn't pay for the sins of the father, nor does a father pay for the sins of the child. Each person pays for his own sin. So how do we explain that what happened? That one person sinned and another person and other people were killed in battle because of it. So the real simple answer is this, one simple thing. There's the idea of God showing his countenance towards us, revealing his presence, that he's with us, protecting us, and being involved in the providence of what happens to us in a particular way. And that's what happened in the first battle. So all God really does in the second battle, he doesn't decree that anyone should die. He doesn't say that I'm going to punish all of you and kill all of you because person A got me upset and therefore the judgment is that I'm going to... No. We have a simple reaction, so to speak, from God, is that I'm going to step back. I was invested, I was involved, I was with you in the fight. I was in front of you in the battle. All I'm going to do right now after this where you didn't follow properly my ways, this person, I'm going to step back and you're on your own. And so when we understand that there's a certain type of providence that's built off of inactivity on God's part, inactivity, which is really normal because who says God should be so active and involved in controlling what happens in this world? Really, God should step back and watch us shine our light, and make God happy, like a beautiful child that just makes a father and a mother smile when they're beautiful and adorable and precious and sweet and good. And so really, God should step back and watch us build his world, spread goodness in his world, love, help. And he just looks back and adores us, loves to watch the movie we create, the life we create when we do the right things. Why should God always have to get involved and do things for us, stop us? That's not really allowing your creations to do their part as created beings. That's controlling. So God doesn't want to really control everything that happens in the world. God is manifest sometimes in a way to make miracles so we can strengthen our faith in him so we could see that he's really here and he really cares and he's really in control. But ultimately, the status quo, so to speak, of the way God runs or manages this world is, I step back and I let you do your thing. I give you guys your space to be who you are and who you need to become. So that's the standard. And if we apply that now, so God says, I'm going to step back, but this time it's not because I want to give you your space to do your thing. It's because I'm upset. Again, these human terms have to be understood. God doesn't get upset the way we get upset. But you did something wrong, and the strict judgment. There's the two modes of judgment. One is a more loving and forgiving mode of judgment. One is a more strict, demanding judgment. And so he's now being more strict with us and saying like this: you don't deserve my protection. You don't deserve my extra involvement. So I'm stepping back, and you're on your own. You're on your own. You're going to go fight a war tomorrow. You're going to fight a battle. You're on your own. And when that happened, so the army that went out to attack the next city on their own wasn't strong enough. They weren't strong enough to defeat their enemy. In fact, they were weak and they were killed, and we had to run away. And many of the Jewish soldiers were killed. But that wasn't God killing them. That was God stepping back and saying, I'm not protecting you today. Okay, so now let's look at October 7th. And it comes back to the first thing I said. People ask, how could that happen? How could such a thing happen to us? So I'll ask the other question. How come it didn't happen before? How come it hasn't happened 10 times, 50 times? From our enemies that would love to do this on a daily basis. Sick, animals full of hate. The answer is because all those other times God was protecting us. God said no. There's verses in Psalms. The nations make plans of how they're going to destroy us, how they're going to attack us, how they're going to kill us. And God comes and disrupts all of those plans and doesn't let them happen. But that's God stopping it from happening. But then we can unfortunately be in a position in our relationship between us and God where God says, okay, I'm stepping back. I'm not protecting you today. And let's see what happens. And that's one way to understand what happened on the 7th of October. God said, because of this decision by God as this stricter judgment, maybe because of our behavior, we all have to figure out what we were doing wrong, that we were vulnerable on that day. But he simply said one thing: I'm stepping back. It's called in more terminology, hester panim. God's going to hide his countenance, hide his protection, hide his providence from us, and we're going to be, so to speak, on our own. And then that could be a very simple answer as to what happened. Right? What happened is that those evil people were allowed to then bring their schemes and actualize them, because God said, today I'm not stopping them. And that's tragic. And again, it's hard, and I'm not saying that I've solved our problem and said, okay, great, now let's go home and be happy. No. Why did God do that? How could God decide not to protect us from those ruthless, evil enemies of God and of God's people? How could he let that happen? And so we have to go one step further and understand that there's a right and a left hand to the way God runs this world. There's a punishing hand and there's a loving hand. There's a providence that loves and there's a providence that punishes, that is strict. And somehow our actions below cause a response above. There's a very, very known saying: the way we act here in this world will cause the divine judgment above to mimic that on some level. That means if we're going to be benevolent, if we're going to be loving and kind and create unity and brotherly love and build and help each other, if we're going to be behaving, if we're going to get along, then God above, this spiritual manifestation of God's involvement in our world, in our judgment, is with a smile, is with love. That's how you're behaving below. That's how I'm going to behave above. When we're the opposite, unfortunately, if we're hateful, spiteful, hurting each other, destroying each other, when there's fighting and hate here, so then we waken up that reaction above. And so the wrath of God's judgment, which is one of the modes of how he judges us, can become ignited. Now I'm not trying to blame anyone certainly not any one type of people, and not even us as a people, because ultimately, and I'll preface this with whatever I'm going to say that follows, is honestly, we're all trying on some level to do the best we can. If I fall into anger and start yelling and screaming at somebody, it's not that I hate that person from the bottom of my heart. It's not that I'm a cruel person. It's that life is hard, and we're emotional, and we're unstable. We're a broken people in a broken generation. We're all suffering from some kind of level of mental instability. And so we don't mean to do some of the harsh, tragic things that we do to each other. But nonetheless, we're doing it. And so let's now look at the other side of the coin. Israel and the Jewish people, specifically in Israel, were reaching almost the point where it seemed to all of us, watching the news, listening to the reports, even just living here, almost to a point of no return. Think about where things reached. I was amazed, but thankful, but amazed that it hadn't reached violence so much, and it hadn't reached the loss of Jewish lives. But I think we were not so many steps away from, God forbid, beginning to almost kill each other. Okay? And that can never be. That can never be. I'm not blaming any one side, because it takes two sides to have a fight and two sides to hate. It might take one side to start a fight, but it takes two sides to have a fight. So I'm not accusing any one side and vindicating any other side. That perhaps can be explored at another time, but not now. Right now, we're saying like this: what was the problem and what could be the solution? We said, what could we do? We could strengthen our faith. We can pray for one another, and we can believe in one another. We can love one another. We can help one another. That's what we can start to do now to rectify what possibly, again, I'm only speaking, I'm not a prophet yet. I can only speak about what we possibly can do, almost logically and certainly, to help our standing in the eyes of God improve. And if our standing in the eyes of God improves, then we'll see more of God's manifestation of loving kindness and protection. And that's exactly what we said with the Bible. That's what the Bible shows us. Don't look at the stories like it's random history. The stories are God's stories. God is behind, in between the lines. He's there really doing everything. And sometimes doing everything means giving us our space so that we can do our part and become partners with Him in creation. Sometimes it means giving us space because He's punishing us and saying, you don't deserve my protection. And unfortunately, we see what could happen. October 7th, Hitler in Nazi Germany, the Romans, the Greeks, the Russians, they're not such saints either. The people from Ukraine generations ago murdered Jews like it was like a golf activity. Go and let's murder some Jews, pogroms. Anytime they got upset and angry because they weren't happy with their lives, so they take it out on who? Take it out on the Jew. So we're not dealing with saints around the world. It's funny, the world is very conveniently trying to define and label us as the devil. Does this look like the devil to you? We're not the devil. It's the same anti-Semitism, hate for something and someone that's different from you, and that's maybe sometimes more successful than you. That is why the entire world is turning against a little dot. You know how many times you have to blow up the screen, have to zoom in till you can even see Israel beyond all that green? It's sick and it's sad that these people call themselves people that think that they're using their head. But that's a discussion again for another time. I told you you could get angry. You can start also to hate. That's what they want. Hate breeds hate. But that's not our way. We've always chosen life, and that's why we're living. And that's also another answer, what we can do. We have to do the only thing we really can do, is pick ourselves up if we're able to, when we're able to, and continue living. Because everyone else out there that's choosing to kill and to hate, they're not living anymore. They're stealing away their own life and their own blessing. And we see where that leads to. Every society and every people that have ever come to try to kill us or destroy us are not here anymore. So what do you think is going to happen this round in this boxing match? Round 12. What do you think is going to happen? Who's going to be standing at the end of this final round of this boxing match of hate and love, of goodness and evil? Who do you think is going to be standing at the end? Iran? That's who's going to be standing at the end? Hamas? They're going to get the gold medal? No. We're going to be standing at the end because as we stood from the beginning. And again, everything that's happening is between us and our God. It's an internal thing. They think that they're better than us because God gave us a slap gave us a wake-up call. They're not any better than us. They are guilty in every country of raping, murdering, kidnapping, human trafficking. Just look at the news. It doesn't make the papers like Israel does, but for defending ourselves against annihilation. We're the devil. And again, that's not the main point of our discussion. But it's hard to escape the emotions and the unfairness. But that's dropping to a lower level. Let's read the Bible of today, not the headlines of today.